Hi, everybody. We're getting close to the end. We're on chapter 6. It's called Finders Keepers. After lunch on the Saturday after the dog show, Henry was in his room feeding his catfish. He dropped a tiny pinch of food into the water and watched it drift down to the bottom of the aquarium where the catfish busily dug through the sand to find it. Henry! Robert was calling from the front yard. Henry put the lid back on his aquarium and went out to the front porch. Hi, what do you want? Come on out and let's practice tumbling like the fellows in the gym at the Y. Okay. Henry ran down the front steps. Ribsy looked up from the bone he was gnawing and growled. It was not a cross growl. It was a growl that meant, Don't bother me. Can't you see I'm busy? The boys practiced standing on their hands and turning somersaults on the lawn until Robert said, Come on, let's try that trick where one fellow gets on his back with his feet in the air and the other fellow gets on top of his feet and the first fellow turns him around and around. He flopped on the grass with his feet in the air. Come on, try it, he said. Henry sat on Robert's feet and lay back with his arms and legs outstretched. Robert tried to twirl him around. Henry teetered. Hey, you're kicking me. Henry toppled off over onto Robert. Ugh, Robert sat up. You're too heavy. Let's try something else. I know what. Let's go over to Beezes's house and practice chinning ourselves on her chestnut tree. They found the girls in front of Beezes's house. They were busy tying a long jumping rope from the horse chestnut tree across the sidewalk to the lilac bush. Ramona, who was wearing pink coveralls and curlers in her hair, was scratching on the bark of the chestnut tree with her fingernails. Hi, said Henry. Hello, answered Beezus, stopping work on the rope. Meow, meow, said Ramona. What does she mean, meow? Asked Henry. Oh, don't pay any attention to her, answered Beezus. That's the way she says meow. She's pretending she's a cat. Meow, said Ramona and patted the curlers in her hair. I'm a cat with curly hair. Henry and Robert exchanged disgusted looks. Girls certainly started to be dumb when they were awfully young. They watched the girls in silence. Then they all sat down on the grass and waited. I wish you'd go away, said Mary Jane at last. We're busy. Don't mind us, said Henry. We have all day. Beezus tightened the knot on the jumping rope. Henry Huggins, I think you're mean. Why don't you play in your own yard? We want to watch what you're doing, answered Henry, chewing on a blade of grass. Oh, I know. I'll bet you think you're going to be tightrope walkers, scoffed Robert. Why don't you tie the rope up high? It's only about 2 feet off the ground. Goofy, said Beezus. Every time we walk across it without falling off, we'll move it up a foot. I'll bet even people in the circuses don't start practicing at the top of the circus tent, and they have nets under them, too. Ah, you can't even walk it when it's 2 feet off the ground, scoffed Henry. I'll bet you couldn't walk it if it were 1 inch off the ground. You be quiet, Henry Huggins, ordered Mary Jane. Why don't you and Robert mind your own business? Go on, Beezus. Let's not pay attention to them. They just think they're smart. Beezus opened her mother's umbrella and held it in her right hand. As she stepped up on the rope, Mary Jane took hold of her left hand to steady her. The lilac bush bent under her weight, the rope sagged, and Beezus was standing on the sidewalk with the rope under her feet. Robert and Henry hooted with laughter. You sure look silly standing there on that rope with the umbrella in your hand. You keep quiet, snapped Beezus. Let's see if you can do it if you think you're so smart. Henry laughed harder. She can't even walk it when it's a trillionth of an inch off the sidewalk. Robert rolled on the grass. Not even if it's a billionth of a trillionth of an inch off the sidewalk. Beezus waved the umbrella. You get off my property. You can't make us, yelled Henry. If you don't go home, I'll never speak to you as long as I live. Beezus was really angry. Or me either, Mary Jane glared at the boys. See if we care. Just then, Scooter rode down the street on his bicycle. Look, he yelled, no hands. The others stopped squabbling to watch. As Scooter approached, he bent slowly backward while he continued to pedal. When his head had almost touched the fender over the back wheel, the bicycle began to wobble. The handlebars turned and the bicycle headed for the curb. Scooter tried to sit up. It was too late. He'd lost his balance. The bicycle bounced up the curb and tumbled Scooter sprawling across the grass. The bicycle, stopped by the chestnut tree, toppled over on top of him. Henry and Robert hooted as Scooter sheepishly untangled himself from his bicycle. He rubbed his shin but didn't say anything. The children knew the fall must have hurt, but Scooter wasn't going to admit it. Well, anyway, I did it once, he said, carefully feeling his right elbow to make sure it wasn't broken. Ah, I'll bet you didn't, Henry was pleased. Usually he was the one to have accidents while Scooter watched. I did too. I bet you didn't. Keep quiet, all of you, shouted Beezus, and get off my property this minute. Beezus, you keep out of this, ordered Henry. Ah, you're just a girl, sneered Scooter. Yeah, just a girl, echoed Robert. Anyway, it isn't your property. My dad pays rent on it, so it's just the same as my property. Beezus raised the umbrella to hit Scooter. Hit him, yelled Mary Jane, far from her usual ladylike self. There's Scooter. That's what he looked like on his bike. Not real safe. Don't you dare hit me. Hey, you kids. It was a strange voice. The children stopped quarreling to see who it was. A strange boy was sitting astride a bicycle by the curb. He was a big boy, big enough to be in the 7th or 8th grade. He didn't belong on Klickitat Street, and none of them had ever seen him before. I've been yelling at you for 5 minutes, he said and grinned. Is one of you Henry Huggins? Henry was so surprised he didn't answer. Who was this boy, and how did he know his name? Robert nudged Henry, who remembered he hadn't answered. Oh, yes, he said, that's me. The boy reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a newspaper clipping that showed Henry and Ribsy at the dog show. Henry couldn't understand why this strange boy was carrying that picture with him. Just then, Ribsy began to bark furiously, and Henry saw him running down the street toward them. Dizzy, the boy shouted and sprang from his bicycle. Here, Dizzy! Ribsy jumped up on the boy and licked his hands. The boy laughed and patted him, and when Ribsy would stand still long enough, scratched him behind his left ear. That's funny, thought Henry. How does he know Ribsy likes to be scratched behind his left ear? And why does he call him Dizzy? His name isn't Dizzy, he said to the boy. It's Ribsy, and he's my dog. Ribsy looked at the boy and wagged his tail again. A terrible thought came to Henry. Ribsy must have belonged to the boy before he found him in the drugstore over a year ago. The boy had seen his picture in the paper and had come to take him away. If only Ribsy hadn't won the prize in the dog show and had his picture in the paper. Then the boy would never have found him. Henry didn't know what to do. He couldn't give up Ribsy after a whole year. He couldn't. He moved closer to Ribsy and put his hand on his collar. He's my dog, he said. He's my dog, and you can't take him away. He was a skinny old dog when I found him, and I bought him a collar and a license and a dish, and now I buy him 2 pounds of horse meat every week and Woofy's dog food besides. And I wash him and brush him and everything, Henry gulped. You can't take him away. Henry does take awfully good care of him, added Beezus loyally. Henry found him, so he must have run away from you, said Robert. Finders keepers, losers weepers, chanted Mary Jane. Well, I had him a lot longer than you have, said the boy, and I fed him and brushed him too. I had him when he was a puppy. He used to chase his tail so much I named him Dizzy, and the only reason he ran away was because he was heartbroken. I went to scout camp for the summer, and Mom and Dad went east, and we left Dizzy with my aunt and uncle. They said he was so lonesome and homesick he wouldn't eat or play or anything. Then one day they couldn't find him anywhere. They thought maybe he'd gone home to look for me, so they drove over to our house to look for him. He wasn't there, and they looked every place. They advertised in the paper and everything. So he did run away, said Robert. You left him, and he ran away. Ribsy licked the boy's hand again. Look, he remembers me and wants to come home with me. But he likes me too, protested Henry. Ribsy looked at Henry and wagged his tail. For the first time, Scooter spoke. We like Ribsy right here in this neighborhood. He's just about the most popular dog around here, and every one of us would miss him. Henry stared at Scooter in amazement. It was the first time he'd heard him say anything good about Ribsy. Yes, we all like him, agreed Robert. All the kids at Glenwood School like him. He waits for Henry every day under the fir tree, and all the kids know him. Yeah, what about us? Asked Beezus. Henry's taken care of him for a whole year, and I don't think it's fair for you to take him away. He didn't have a collar or a license tag when I found him, said Henry. He had them when I went off to scout camp. I don't know how he lost them, except my aunt said he was awfully thin when he disappeared. Maybe he slipped his collar off over his head or somebody took it. The boy reached in his pocket. I have my birthday money that you can take. He held out a $5 bill to Henry. $5? I wouldn't sell Ribsy for $1,000,000. Oh, I didn't mean for you to sell him, said the boy hastily. I mean the money to help pay his expenses for the last year. I know it isn't enough, but it's all I have. Henry felt sorry for the boy. He could understand why he would want to keep a smart dog like Ribsy, but Henry couldn't part with his dog. Nothing exciting had ever happened to him before, and look at all the things that had happened this year. Henry knelt and put his arm around his dog's neck. You wouldn't want to leave me, would you, Ribsy? You wouldn't want to leave Clickatat Street, would you? Ribsy licked Henry's face. The stranger knelt and snapped his fingers. Dizzy, you want to come home with me, don't you? I wonder what's going to happen.